If you'd like family-based sermons, check out my Family Sermons playlist. And this video is the 9th video within the playlist. I'm doing something a little different for today's Excerpts series video, and that is, instead of a sermon per se, we will be featuring content from the 2023 March on Washington. I've condensed it down to 10 speakers who I believe had some of the most powerful words to say about our empowerment. Ideally, this will be an empowering dialogue. According to the National Park Service.gov, it states that the March on Washington was the largest gathering for civil rights of its time. An estimated 250,000 people attended the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. The event focused on employment discrimination, civil rights abuses against African Americans, Latinos, and other disenfranchised groups, and support for the Civil Rights Act that the Kennedy administration was attempting to pass through Congress. This is the march that has arguably the most famous speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is his I Have a Dream speech. In 2023, the 60th anniversary of the historic March on Washington took place. And according to the Washington Post, from its direct words, it says, King's eldest son, Martin Luther King III, along with other civil rights leaders, will stand in front of the Lincoln Memorial and emphasize that the gathering is not a commemoration. It is a continuation of the work of his parents and other leaders who came before him to fight for social justice and civil rights. If you would like more information on the speeches, where to get them from, the different names of the speakers as well, I've placed all that information within the description box below. My question is, what if we had speakers like this in different religious facilities more often? So what if more pastors, bishops, etc., spoke for our rights more often? What if we had a whole culture, a whole mentality that was centered on progressing and a movement towards our empowerment?
Let's welcome Director of National Action Network from the great state of Michigan, Reverend Charles Williams.
All right, no justice. No justice. What do we want? When do we want it? All right, we're here 60 years later. 60 years later. After urban uprisings, boycotts, marches, sit-ins, freedom rides, and electoral participation, we came back because we still fighting for justice of same injustices that we fought for 60 years ago. Police brutality, voting rights, economic inequality, and of course, as many of you all know, fair housing. Look, we came back to make it very clear. We don't want diversity, equity, and inclusion. Reading groups, positions, forums, and work groups. Well then, Reverend, what do we want? What we want is we want our neighborhoods revitalized. What we want is our votes counted. What we want is a competent, accountable, competent police in our neighborhoods. What we want is fair access to economic opportunity and contracts. What we want is access to quality education, to give our children a handout, not a handout. What we want is health equity and the end to health disparities. What we want is relief on student loans like to the banks and the insurance companies in 2009. We want a seat at the table. Repeat after me. We want a seat We want a seat at the table. And if we don't get it, we're going to grab our folding chair and continue to beat down poverty, inequity, and injustice. No justice.
President and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, let's welcome Charles Steele.
My brothers and sisters, I'm so happy to be here to bring about a correlation and a collaboration with all God's children. Being in the position of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for 17 and a half, 18 years, it's something that I'm proud of. But to be here to continuate and to commemorate, to let you know that we ain't free. We have a long ways to go. And politics has never freed the oppressed. The oppressed must free politics. You must understand that you must hold our elected officials accountable. You must understand that no man is an island. We must understand that we are in this thing together. The diameter of your mind is determined by the circumference of your environment. You must realize it's your socialization of folks who are not afraid. Scared folks can't lead nothing, but they can set you up and get you killed. You can't be afraid and say you're fighting for justice. We must be fired up, and we must stay fired up. We must always realize that many a people has paid the price for us to be free. I'm not here to sugarcoat nothing. What's wrong with America is racism, and you need to call it like it is. It's the transatlantic African slave trade. America has never been freed from that. And can't no politics free you. You got to free politics. Woo, somebody. It was politics. It was politics that brought about the transatlantic African slave trade. How in the world can America act like they are innocent? America is guilty for economic deprivation, for the quality of life, for health care. It ain't no foreigner, it's America. If you love me like you say, why you treat me like you do? My Lord. So we got to understand that I hear the music, but I got to leave you. But I ain't leaving the movement. I'm leaving the music, but I ain't leaving the movement. Fired up! Fired up! Ain't gonna take it no more. God bless you.
Bishop Dennis V. Proctor.
I'm Bishop Dennis V. Proctor of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. I'm honored to be here today because I was here 60 years ago when my father was up here and I was out at the reflecting pool. What a difference a legacy can make. The Lincoln Memorial behind us, we had a lot of speakers, so let me just teach a little bit and then I'm out. The Lincoln Memorial was dedicated in 1922 in front of an entirely segregated audience. Nothing of Lincoln's emancipation of the millions of black people from the institution of slavery was even mentioned. The theme of that age was parades and parties. It took 4 years for an organization to find the value of using this structure as a place of demonstration. That organization was the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in 1926. I stand today in that legacy of freedom fighters and freedom movers, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, all bastion leaders of the AME Zion Church. And today, our pledge is not to let the movement die, but to continue until victory is won. Thank you.
Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson.
Good morning. No justice. No justice. No peace. On behalf of the board of the National Action Network and our president, Reverend Sharpton, we are thankful for all of those who are gathering together, participating in this march forward. It is not merely a march of reflection, but it's a march of projecting into the future. We want our sons and daughters to come to an era where they can inherit what we have fought for and invested in. And we will not be robbed in this hour of all that we fought and invested. We will not let the clock turn back. We will not go back to what we've been. We'll go forward to take over and to be all that God has intended for us to be. There's a passage in Jeremiah, real quickly, it says, Jeremiah is talking about the conditions of Israel. And he says, the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. That is the predicament of African Americans in this country today. We fought in the fight. The harvest has come. The nation is built on our backs. We've come through great difficulties and great hardships. And we've had legislation passed. We've had marches. We've had achievements. We now have 60 people in the Congress. But the harvest is past, meaning that the time we fulfilled our purpose happened. And then there came the time of the second harvest. And we still, African Americans, are not saved. This nation was built on our investment, built on the backs of African Americans, African people, built in sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears. And the harvest came after our investment. But the plantation owners, those who gathered the harvest, kept all of the harvest for themselves and never distributed. And now people talk about today old money. Well, old money is simply our money. It's the money that we didn't get for what we invested. And we're here today to call for the check to come back satisfied. Martin King said it was a check that turned insufficient funds. Today we come to serve notice that we are determined to collect what we have invested, what our forefathers and mothers have deposited in this nation. Every measure, every single measure of quality of life in this country, African Americans are at the bottom. You take any disease, you take our schools, you take our economics, every aspect, we're at the bottom. But we are not going to. We're not going to stay there because another generation is rising to build upon the generations before us. And not only is another generation rising, we're linking arms with others who are oppressed. Because our oppression is a disease that is not containable. You cannot be discriminatory on one people and think that that will not show up in all segments of the society. And therefore, we are all here because we all have an investment in this nation turning and living up to its possibilities. So I ask you, let us leave here determined to not let the fire go out, determined to be engaged, determined to rise to the moment. Martin King said it this way. Ralph Waldo Emerson said in 1871, if you can build a better mousetrap than your neighbor, even if you build your house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to your door. And this becomes increasingly true. We must not set out to be just a great Negro doctor or Negro lawyer, for if we do, we've already flunked the matriculation examination into the University of Integration. Martin went on to say, if it falls your lot to be a sweet street, go on out in sweet streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweet streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweet streets like the marble maker. Sweet streets so well that the whole host of heaven and earth will pause and say, here lived the great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley. If you can't be a main road, be the path. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail, but be the best of whatever you are. Get together, my brothers and sisters. There's a great camp meeting on the other side.
She is the vice chair of the board of National Action Network. Let's welcome Jennifer Jones Austin.
As Vice Chairwoman, I stand before you proudly, representing the women of NAN, Ebony Riley, Rachel Nordlinger, Katrina Jefferson, Trudy Lucas, Dominique Sharpton, Ashley Sharpton, and many more who, like the women 60 years ago, worked tirelessly to help make this moment possible. In words penned decades ago by my father, comrade of Dr. King, faith and civil rights leader, Reverend Dr. William Augustus Jones, Jr. Blacks in America still today have freedom without finance and access without assets, which is tantamount to existence without equity. 160 years after slavery, 60 years after the March on Washington, and still these words ring true. Today, unemployment for Black Americans has hit record lows, but Black persons equally educated and experienced still earn significantly less than their white counterparts. Black women are the most educated group in the United States, yet many are denied fair wages and their worth. And with lower pay comes higher debt, all but ensuring the average Black family's inability to save and build wealth. With these and numerous other systemic barriers working together, today 1 in 3 Black children lives in poverty, compared to less than 1 in 10 white children. 60 years ago, Dr. King and movement leaders understood that racism is the most effective tool for upholding an unjust capitalist system. That's why they marched on Washington for jobs and freedom. Reverend Sharpton, Andrea, and Martin Luther King III, they understand that, and we all understand that. And that's why we are gathered here today to march for jobs, jobs that pay a true and living wage, for real and meaningful opportunities to grow and build assets, for our children to no longer live in poverty. We come again today, and we're going to keep coming until this nation ends economic injustice in all of its forms: wage discrimination, education inequality, criminal injustice and mass incarceration, misogyny, voter suppression, environmental injustice, gender identity bias, and more. As beneficiaries of all the good, all the blood and the sweat and the tears that were shed by the leaders and doers of the movement 60 years ago, the burden bearers, we now are the burden bearers. And ending economic injustice is our burden. It's our responsibility. Together we can. May God order our steps.
Greg Jackson.
Good morning. I'm Greg Jackson, the Executive Director for Community Justice Action Fund. And I stand here not by choice, but by circumstance. Because only 2 miles from here, I was shot. And the bullet that hit me hit 2 arteries, and I came within 26 minutes of death. When I laid on that pavement, all I could think about was, how do I stand up one more time? Right now in America, every 8 minutes, someone is shot and killed. A mother is mourning their children, and a tombstone stands where a life should live. One of those lives was my mentee, DeMarcos. DeMarcos, who hosted his own End the Gun Violence rally, that buried 3 of his friends before he was shot and killed on his front porch. These are the lives that we're losing every single day. Every year, over 138,000 people are killed from this crisis. This is the #1 cause of death for all youth in America. The #1 cause of death for all black men in America. The #2 cause of death for all black women and all Latino men in America. But yet we have not seen the action to deal with the biggest health crisis of our time. In the past 30 years, we have only seen 1 law passed to address gun violence. 1 law. And yet our bodies are laying on the pavement every day. Every 8 minutes, another life is lost. And the people who are laying on the pavement have the answers. We know we need a public health response. We know we need resources for victims and survivors. We know that we need an Office of Violence Prevention. We know that we need gun safety measures. We know that we need to deal with this crisis head on, like we did COVID-19, like we're doing the opioid crisis, like we've done with every other health crisis in America. But yet, those black and brown bodies don't matter enough to see the action that we need. I look at you, every one of you within the sound of my voice, I look at you because this isn't an issue that's a civil rights issue or a social justice issue. This is life or death for you, like it was life or death for me. Don't be that person in the hospital. Don't be that one fighting for your life when you have the opportunity to take action. Thank you.
Brenda Moss.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Moss. I am a leader at Everytown for Gun Safety. On this very day, 9 years ago, my son Sean Moss' life was taken by someone that should not have had a gun. Am I mad that he's gone? I'm mad at the way that he went. I'm mad that extremists and gun lobbyists say that they can't, when in all actuality, they won't. I'm mad that people that look like me can't knock on doors or run in neighborhoods for fear of being shot. I'm mad because there are not resources for families like mine to deal with the tragedy and the aftermath, whether it's a national event, whether it's an event in someone's backyard, or whether it's a wounded person. So just let me be clear. Am I mad? Yes. Will I cry? Absolutely. But will I stop? No. Why? Because contrary to frustration, I am here. I am a must, I am an absolute, and I am very necessary. So I leave with you today what my son said to me when he would look at me and find me trying to figure it out. He said, Dukes, there's nothing you can't do. It's a new day, so let's get it.
He is the attorney for Black America. Let's welcome Attorney Benjamin Crump, along with families who have been impacted by police brutality.
As the enemies of equality attack Black America and other people of color by passing legislation to ban our Black history in the classrooms, to ban our Black books, to ban our Black authors, to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and have the audacity to try to mandate that they teach our children that slavery had positive benefits for our ancestors. As your Attorney General, I declare now more than ever that we must be unapologetic defenders of black life, black liberty, and black humanity. And just like they try to ban our black history, we must tell them without black history, you wouldn't have American history.
That's right.
And just like we fought for justice for the families of Trayvon Martin, the families of Eric Garner, the families of George Floyd, the families of Oscar Grant, the families of Stephon Clark, the families of A.J. Owens, the families of Patrick Leola, the families of Botham Jones, the families of Terrence Crutcher, the families of Jelani Day, the families of Alton Sterling, the families of Ronald Green, and the families of Tyree Nichols. We must also fight to protect our black literature, our black culture, and our black history for all of our children. I mean all of our children, our black children, our white children, our brown children, our red children. They all have to know that all of their histories, all of their cultures contributed to American history. And brothers and sisters, we have to be ready to fight until hell freezes over.
Yes, sir.
And then we got to be ready to fight on the ice. Because in conclusion, as I rest my case, all of our children can never ask the question, do they really mean it when they say Black Lives Matter? No. Our children got to know that we're willing to fight for them, and if need be, we're willing to die for them in the spirit of Martin Luther King and our ancestors. God bless you. Let's protect black history at all costs.
That's right. That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand to your feet and let's welcome the president and founder of the National Action Network, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton.
No justice. No justice. No justice. We're not going to take long because we have to move out for the march. Let me say this, all of you under the trees, come on out, because we're going to line up. Today was a day to show our strength. Thousands of you come 60 years later to say that we are the continuation of a movement. 60 years later, we are facing affirmative action being suspended, and there are people that are trying to go after businesses. You heard from the Fearless Fund. They're going after diversity in large corporations. They're going after firms. I want to announce today that we're going to fight back. We are not going to let you take affirmative action and diversity firms. I'm like a doctor. I'll make house calls. We will march on the homes and the companies that if you think you can take money out of our community and cut us off, we are not going to allow that. We're going to have a fall of economic sanctions against those that bow to this. They will not be able to turn back the clock. They want to stop blacks from voting. We're going to vote anyhow. No matter how hard you make it, we coming anyhow. They're going to try to put women back in the kitchen with an apron. We're not going back in the kitchen. We're not putting the apron back on. We're going to stand up for who we are and where we are and what we are. Our fathers fought for this, and we're going to maintain it. 60 years ago, Martin Luther King talked about a dream. 60 years later, we're the dreamers. The problem is we're facing the schemers. It's the streamers on one side, the schemers on the other. The dreamers are fighting for voting rights. The schemers are changing voter regulations in states. It's the dreamers against the schemers. The dreamers are in Washington, D.C. The schemers are being booked in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Fulton County Jail. The dreamers will win. The dreamers will march. The dreamers will stand up. We are the dreamers. We're the children of the dream. Let us march in the name of the dreamers. Let's stand up together, arm in arm. That's why Jonathan Greenblatt's here. That's why McGuire's here. That's why civil rights leaders are here. It's time to march. Everybody line up, and we're going to march from Lincoln's Memorial to the King Memorial. The dreamers facing the schemers.
Good morning. I'm Bishop Talbert Swan II, representing the Church of God in Christ, and on behalf of our presiding bishop, Bishop J. Drew Sheard, and our constituents across America and the world, we came here to tell America that here we are, 60 years later, and we're not going anywhere, and that you cannot erase us. Today, we stand in the shadow of a vacillating president who has been deemed the great emancipator, but he receives far too much credit, while American historians have diminished the roles of black leaders and abolitionists and activists who are determined to transform this nation. We live in strange times where our non-melanated brothers and sisters want to convince us that slavery was nothing more than a vocational training program that gave our ancestors marketable skills, that 40 years of affirmative action was sufficient to wipe away 400 years of discrimination, and that 48 years of voting rights was enough to level the playing field. America wants to erase its original sin and pretend the enslavement, the rape, the murder, the brutalization, the dehumanization, segregation, emaciation, and mass incarceration of black people are merely figments of our imagination. They don't want the truth to make little Billy and Karen feel bad about what grandma and grandpa did. But the more you try to erase America's history of racism, the more it manifests itself. It manifests itself on riverboat docks in Montgomery, on streets in New York and Baltimore, when non-melanated Americans justify the cops shooting Jaylen Walker 90 times, but then defend an ex-president with 90 criminal indictments. We are here to say that you cannot erase us. You tried it with slavery. You tried it with Jim Crow, with Tuskegee experiments, with crack cocaine epidemics, with extrajudicial murders, and you keep trying, but the more you keep trying, the more God keeps raising us up, lifting us, and giving us resilience and the strength to endure. You can't erase us, Ron DeSantis. You can't erase us, Sarah Huckabee. You can't erase us, Greg Abbott. We're going to be here fighting for our rights, fighting for our children, fighting against crooked cops and racist judges and white supremacist governors and every evil that wants to subjugate us to the bondage of bigotry. We're not going anywhere. You cannot erase us. We may be black. Racism might be ugly, but we're here. Somebody raise your hand and say, we're here.
Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for more.